session ini today, our first session to speak about the ilm al-mantiq, knowledge of mantiq. In English we call it formal and logic. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us inshallah ta'ala with the understanding. May Allah bless us in tawfiq and hidayah. And bless us with goodness in dunya and akhirah. Ameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen. So for our first session, what we will do is that I will discuss on the Mabadi Ashara, the 10 principles of Mantiq. And these 10 principles, basically it is to give us an introduction of a particular subject in terms of its definition, the benefits, the contents of the knowledge, the one who established knowledge, and so on and so forth. As what inshallah ta'ala later on we will see it. So this is basically what you see in the screen. It is the Mabadi Ashara, which is written by Al-Imam Al-Sabban. Let me adjust a few things first. So this is the Mabadi Ashara. So this is what inshallah ta'ala will cover. Al-Imam Al-Sabban, he mentioned Mabadi al-Ashara li kulli ilmin, the foundations, the 10 principles for every knowledge. Inna mabadi'a kulli fannin ashara. Al-haddu wal-mawdu'u thumma as-samara. ونسبة وفضله والواضع والاسم الاستمداد حكم شارع مسائل والبعض بالبعض اكتفى ومن درى الجميع هذا الشرف. So these are basically the 10 principles mentioned in this particular poem. So inshallah we'll go through one by one. The first which is very important of these 10 principles is what is mentioned as al-had. If you see here, if you see this, the first one, he said al-haddu, then followed by wal mawdu'u summa thamara. So al-had basically it means definition. Basically it means any definition. So what we are going to do now is to understand what is the definition of the knowledge of mantiq. This is the first thing. Knowledge of al-mantiq. And there are two definitions of mantiq. We have a definition in terms of its content, and we have any definition in terms of its fruits or benefits. So the first definition, as you can see in the screen, this is the definition in terms of the content of ilm al-mantiq, meaning what do you study in this particular knowledge. So he said ilmun yubahathu fihi anil ma'lumati تصورية والتصديقية من حيث إنها توصل إلى مجهول تصوري أو تصديقي. The knowledge of mantiq, it is a knowledge that discusses about apprehensive and affirmative information and how it leads to uncover their unknown domains. So this is the definition of the knowledge of mantiq. So basically there are two things here. Number one, we have what is called the tasawwuriyah. This is apprehension. And tasdiqiyah, it is the affirmative. These are the two main topics in the knowledge of mantiq, which in the West they call it formal logic. So they speak about the importance of understanding definition, and for example, when comes to the apprehension, and then they speak about propositions and affirmation, and then after that it is the chapter of syllogism. So the knowledge of mantiq in our Islamic heritage, it is about the same. Where we speak about the importance of ta'rif in the first part, to have a clear tasawwur, to have a clear understanding of a particular word, and then also we speak about qadiyah. That is the proposition, to understand any propositions, which is called al-qadiyah. And then after that we speak about qiyas, that is a syllogism, where we will study about premises of an argument and the conclusion. So what I will do, I will sketch for you, inshallah. See, I will write something to give some examples, inshallah. So as what I mentioned, we have knowledge we have the knowledge of mantiq. This is based on the definition earlier. So number one, we have the chapter of tasawwurat. Or tasawwur. Then number two, we have tasdiq. These are the two main chapters of mantiq that we will study. So when it comes to tasawwur, we learn about the importance of definition. Why any importance of definition? Because, for example, when you have a word, for example, democracy. So if you have a word like this, so in order for you to understand, to not to make any mistake in thinking, it is important to get the definition correct. So by not having the correct definition, you do not understand the meaning. So once you do not understand the meaning, your tasawwur, your apprehension of this particular word is wrong, is false, because of not understanding any definition. So knowledge of mantiq will tell us about how are we able to differentiate between a good definition and a bad definition. So to understand this, we study something that is called kulliyah khamsa. Kulliyah khamsa. Basically, the meaning of kulliyah khamsa is the 5 universal laws, yani of definition, of making any a definition. So this is any the first part any of mantiq, that is tasawwur. Then any we have any the second part any of mantiq, that is called tasdiq. So once any you understand definition, when we go back any to tasdiq, any we speak any about something any that is called qadiyah. Qadiyah is basically, we call it proposition. Preposition, preposition, or we call it any a sentence. We have any a sentence. Sentence any that makes up of the subject and the predicate. So for example, any we say the universe is contingent. The universe is contingent. So this is an example any of a qadiyah, of a sentence that has what we call it mawdu', which is the subject and the predicate. Now this makes any a complete sentence. We have any the universe, and we have any the word contingent. So the first part any the universe. Now this goes back any to tasawwur. It goes back any to tasawwur. Contingent goes back any to tasawwur. And then we have any the thing any that is binding any between the subject and the predicate. Yani in logic any they call it the copula, if not mistaken. Yani the thing any that binds. This is also any part any of tasawwur. So the universe any is contingent. So all this any is called qadiyah. It's called any qadiyah. So when it comes any to qadiyah, there's always any the question that it is subjected to false and truth. So for example, if I make any statement, the universe any is contingent. The universe any is contingent. This is any a statement, qadiyah. It is subjected any to be truth, subjected any to be false. So how do I prove this statement? So then I need any to have an argument. I need to have something any that in logic any we call it argument. To prove any that this statement any is correct. When it comes any to argument, there are any a few things. We have any the premise, and we have the conclusion. So I will give an example, inshallah. I will just erase this. Yes. So I will give an example of an argument. And before we go to some of the English and terminologies. In Arabic we call it qiyas. We call it qiyas. In English we call it syllogism. What is the meaning of qiyas? Yani a qiyas is what is called an argument. So for qiyas, we need to have any premise. For example, premise 1, premise 2, and then we have conclusion. So if the first premise is correct, second premise is correct, the conclusion also must be correct. This is called a deductive argument. Deductive, an argument that is deductive. So here comes the example. So I will use an example as what mentioned by our ulama. Usually, this is my first time trying out this way of teaching. I hope it works, inshallah. So now, for example, we say the universe is subjected to change. Everything that is subjected to change is contingent. Okay, this is the first premise. This is the second premise. The first premise says then the universe is subjected to change. So this is a qadiyya. This is a statement. It's called a premise in qiyas. Is this sentence correct? Yes, and we say it is correct. The universe is subjected to change. This can be understood by our observation. The coming of night and day, the change in weather, and so on and so forth. Everything that is subjected to change is contingent. Yani when something is subjected to change, it has a beginning. The meaning of contingent here is hadith. In Aqidah, we call it hadith. So what is the conclusion? So now we have the first premise, we have the second premise. So what is the conclusion? What is the conclusion? The conclusion is the universe is contingent. So I will write the conclusion here. The conclusion, the universe is contingent. So if you look at this process, you have any the first premise, and you have any the first premise, you have the second premise, and then you have any this conclusion. So this is what is called, in mantiq, we call it qiyas. In English, it is named as syllogism, and it is an argument. So whenever the logicians and speaks any about argument, what they meant is an argument that has premises and conclusion. So this is the chapter of tasdiq. Earlier I mentioned that there is tasawwur and there is tasdiq. So if you go back to the definition, ilmun yubhasu fihi anil ma'lumati tasawwuriyah wa tasdiqiyah. So this tasdiq consists of qiyas, qadiyah, and also qiyas. Min haythu innaha tusilu, that it will reach, that it leads to, ila majhulin tasawwuri aw tasdiqi, to uncover their unknown domains. So whenever you have the premises and you have a sound argument with the sound conclusion, so it increase in affirmation, because of these evidences that are present, that we are able to come to affirmation, tasdiq. So all this requires evidences that is portrayed in the premises. So let me write again, to get a better picture, inshallah. Basically what I'm doing is to explain the definition. We are still speaking about al-had. So the thing about mantiq, that's what we mentioned, there are two things, tasawwur and tasdiq. So we have under tasawwur, we have principles and objectives. Number 1, number 2. And then under tasdiq, same thing, we have principles and objectives. What is the principles of tasawwur? It is called kulliyah khamsa, the 5 general rules. Objectives is ta'rifat, to understand definitions. As for tasdiq, the principles is qadaya, the plural of qadiyah, to understand sentences, prepositions. The objective is qiyas, to understand argument. So it is important when we study mantiq, we have to understand this connection. If you look, we have tasawwur, kulliyah khamsa, ta'rifat, and then under tasdiq we have qadaya, and we have qiyas. So the first thing is to understand ta'rifat. definitions. How do we understand definitions? Kulliyah khamsa are the tools that will help you to make a good definition. So let me give you an example, and we do it slowly, inshallah. I will just take note. I will speak about this first. Okay. Okay, I go here. Okay, let me give you an example, a simple example of al-insan. All of us, we know the meaning of al-insan. Al-insan, al-insanu. Okay, if I ask the question, what is the definition of al-insan? Yani if you go back to books of logic, mantiq, definition of insan is al-hayawan, al-hayawanu natiq. This is the definition of insan, ya jama'ah. Al-hayawanu an-natiq. And surprisingly, the first person who gave this definition is Aristotle. He said that human beings are an intellectual animal. Can you imagine? Yani in Arabic, it is more profound and easier to understand, because the word hayawan, this word hayawan, the meaning of hayawan in the Arabic language is anything that has haya, that lives on the face of this earth. So that is why we say insan is part of hayawan. Animals are part of hayawan because there is haya, there is life. Natiq means intellect. Natiq means intellect. So the meaning of insan is an intellectual being. So this is called ta'rif to al-had. This is al-had, ta'rif. So let me explain any further. Now we look at the word hayawan. We look at the word hayawan. Remember, just now when we mentioned the ta'rif of insan is hayawanu natiq. Hayawanu an-natiq. So we have the word hayawan. Hayawan. Under hayawan, we have many members. For example, lion, tigers, human, and we have dogs. So the list goes on. We have cats. All these are hayawan, correct or not? Lion is hayawan, tigers in hayawan, human in hayawan, dogs hayawan, cats in hayawan. So we say that these are the jins that shares the same classification. That is, all of them are considered to be hayawan. Taib. Then we go back when we go back into human beings, under human being, we also have some differences. For example, human beings, there are Malays, Indians, Europeans, and so on. So when we look at this definition, when we look at this hayawan, if the essence of the members are different, it is called jins, the genus, and in English we call it the genus. If the essence are the same, Malays, Indians, Europeans, basically all of them are humans. They are the same in terms of essence. We call it naw'un. So when we want to do any definition, we always have to pay attention to al-jins. We have to pay attention al-jins. On top of hayawan, we have for example, substance. All hayawan is a substance. All hayawan is a substance, and it comes from a substance. And under hayawan, we have all these jins. And under each of this part of hayawan, we have the types, the noun. So when we define human beings, we have to use the jins that is nearest. This hayawan, we say it is genus. Substance is genus. So when I want to define human beings, I have to use the nearest jins, that is hayawan. I cannot use any substance. So in Mantiq we say this is jinsun qarib. Hayawan is jinsun qarib. This is jinsun ba'in. So when I define human beings, I use the word hayawan, and I cannot use the word substance, because if I use the word substance, that is a shortcoming in definition. So now I get the meaning of hayawan, that human beings are hayawan. But what is the thing that differentiate between human beings and tigers and lions? So then we have something that is called al-fasl. Al-fasl. The differentiating the things that differentiate. So in order for me to differentiate between human beings and tigers and lions and dogs, what is the thing that differentiate human beings from other types of the hayawan? That human beings are intellectual. So how I define is that I use jinsun qarib, and I use al-fasl. I use a fasl to differentiate between all other members in the class of hayawan. So that is how I get the definition of hayawan and natiq. So this is basically the part of tasawwur. So al-jins, al-fasl is part of kulliyatul khamsa. So kulliyatul khamsa teach me how to do a proper definition. So the objectives of understanding kulliyatul khamsa, it is to understand ta'rif, the definition. So once I understood the kulliyatul khamsa, the principles of tasawwur, then only I can understand the objective. And this is reason why you study the chapter of tasawwur. We study kulliyatul khamsa, and then our objective is to get any ta'rif. So once we get the correct ta'rif, now it is the time to go into the chapter of tasdiq. And the principle of tasdiq is al-qadaya. The plural of qadiyah. So it is a sentence. It is a sentence. So as what I mentioned earlier, the example of a sentence, we say the universe is subjected to change. This is a qadiyah. So if the qadiyah is correct, then I have to prove the points. So in order to do so, I have to use evidences, and that is where we go into the chapter of qiyas, and we construct our premises to come out with a sound conclusion. So this is what is meant by a sound argument. When you have a good premise that are truthful, and you get the conclusion that is based on truth. So this is basically what we will study in mantiq. So we study kulliyatul khams, ta'rifat, qadaya, and qiyas. So what is the reason we study tasawwur and tasdiq? This is where the definition of mantiq explains. Definition of mantiq as what we see here. He said it is a field of knowledge that discusses about apprehensive, this is the tasawwur, and affirmative information, this tasdiq, and how it leads to uncover their unknown domains. How it leads to uncover their unknown domains. How can we come to a state of affirmation? How can we be convinced whether this particular argument is a sound argument or an unsound argument? By understanding the premises and by deducting the conclusion from those premises. So every word and every information in the premise has to be correct in order for us to derive the correct conclusion. So this is the first definition in terms of its content, in terms of what we will study in the knowledge of mantiq. And then we have the second definition. The second definition is based on the benefits of learning mantiq. And usually, if you look in books of mantiq, and this definition that you see, it says alatun qanuniyatun ta'simu mura'atuha adh-dhihna. It's maf'ul bih here. Alatun qanuniyatun ta'simu mura'atiha adh-dhihna. تعصم مراعاتها الذهن عن الوقوع في الخطأ في فكره. It is a set of principles that act as a tool to protect the mind from bad reasoning. So this is basically the definition of mantiq in terms of its benefits. Meaning, what is the benefit when you learn mantiq? It protects your mind from thinking wrongly. That you are able to think correctly. That you are able to understand things. What you call it in a correct understanding. So this is the first part of the mabadi ashara, the 10 principles. That is to understand definition of the knowledge of mantiq. And then the second principle is mawdu'uhu, the topics that we learn in this particular chapter of mantiq, and meaning what are the things that we learn, or what are the pillars of this knowledge. So what we learn is tasawwur and tasdiq, apprehension and affirmation. Tasawwur is what we mentioned, to understand ta'rifat. Tasdiq, to understand arguments, to understand syllogism, and how premises are constructed for us to attain conclusions. Apprehension is the act or condition of the mind in which it receives a notion of any object, while affirmation is the union of the subject and predicate of a proposition. Both have principles and objectives, as what I mentioned earlier. So here it is mentioned, apprehension is the act or condition of the mind in which it receives a notion of any object. Yani meaning, for example, if I say the word tree, then automatically we will imagine a tree in our mind. This is tasawwur. So in order for this to be our way of thinking to be correct, that is where we speak about the importance of understanding definition. Because by not understanding the correct form of definition, you might be thinking something else. For example, if a person is speaking to you, and a person says a particular word, for example, a person use the word culture. So different people might have different understanding about the meaning of this particular word. Some people might be thinking culture is in terms of what you call it, what people do in their daily life. Some people thought culture is something else. So in order for us to have a correct understanding, we are in need to go back to the definition, the ta'rif. Because just by relying on our mind, on our imagination, many a times our imagination is not correct. We imagine something, but in reality, it is not the case. So that is why we are in need to go back to definition. That is why in Islam, in everything there is a definition. If you study the knowledge of fiqh, for example, if you ask a person, what is fiqh? What is fiqh? For example, a person says fiqh is about halal and haram. You ask any other person, what is fiqh? Said fiqh is about understanding. Some person say about understanding the laws. Or fiqh is about ibadah, understanding the rulings of ibadah. All of this is not correct. When you go back into the definition of fiqh, it is al-ilmu bil ahkami syar'iyyati al-muktasabu min adillati at-tafsiliyah. That the definition of fiqh is, it is knowledge on the divine laws, ahkam syar'iyyah. Then we are in need to understand what is the meaning of syar'iyyah, what is the meaning of al-hukm, what is the meaning of ahkam, al-muktasabu min adillatiha at-tafsiliyah, that it is derived from detailed evidences. So we are in need to understand what is the meaning of dalil tafsili, adilla tafsiliyah. What is the difference between a detailed evidence and a universal evidence? In the knowledge of usulul fiqh, the definition is ma'rifatu dalailil fiqh ijmalan. Ma'rifatu dalailil fiqh ijmalan. To understand the evidences, the dalil in fiqh, which is universal. وكيفية استفادة منها وحال المستفيد. This is the definition of usulul fiqh. So when you compare the definition of fiqh and usulul fiqh, now you can see the difference between the two knowledges. The knowledge of fiqh speaks about dalil tafsili, whereas the knowledge of usulul fiqh speaks about dalil ijmali. How do you understand this? You only understand this if you understand the definitions in your fiqh and definition of usulul fiqh. But if you don't study the definitions and you just base on your imagination, people can imagine mashallah many things. People thought fiqh is only about ibadah. Some people thought fiqh is only about the halal and haram. Some people thought fiqh is about learning about prayers and so on and so forth. Maybe today you ask 10 people give you different answers. So now when we say jama'ah, we are in need to understand the ta'rif. So that is why part of learning our Islamic sciences is to understand the definitions. And the knowledge of mantiq, here comes the knowledge of mantiq. The knowledge of mantiq will teach you the importance of understanding definitions and how to construct a definition. So the knowledge of mantiq speaks about jins. The knowledge of mantiq speaks about naw. That's what I mentioned earlier. The knowledge of mantiq speaks about al-fasl. The knowledge of mantiq speaks about al-arad. Al-arad is an attribute. The knowledge of mantiq speaks about the essence of a particular thing. So this is basically the meaning of kuliyatul khams. it teaches you about the importance of definition and how to construct a proper definition. So this is where he mentioned we have the kulliyatul khams and the ta'rifat, the definitions, to understand the definition. So by understanding any definition, now only we are ready to go to the next part, that is to understand the proposition. This is what he mentioned. Al-qadaya is a statement or assertion that expresses a judgment or opinion. So there is a difference between a word and a sentence. In grammar, in order for us to say a sentence, there must be two main things. You must have the subject and you must have the predicate. In the Arabic grammar, in Nahu, we call it al-kalam. And one of the conditions of kalam is that it is something that is mufid. Jumlatun mufida. Yahsunu sukut. That when you have a sentence where there is a subject and there is a predicate, then yahsunu sukut. We say this is a qadiyah. This is a jumla or kalam. In Mantiq, we call it qadiyah. So there must be the subject and there must be a predicate. Then only we can ascertain whether this is true or false. For example, we say a particular place is on fire. For example, we say the office is on fire. So now this is a sentence. So this particular sentence has the possibility that it is true or false. So when it comes to qadiyah, it is a judgment or opinion. Because judgment meaning, it can be true, it can be false. So once we have any qadiyah, we have to look at the subject and we have to look at the predicate. In Mantiq, we call mawdu'. Mawdu' is the subject and mahmul is the predicate. So in order to understand this particular sentence, we have to understand the definitions of each of the words that construct that particular sentence. This is where the chapter of tasawwur comes. This is where the chapter of tasawwur, to understand the ta'rifat, definition. So once you understand the definition, meaning your tasawwur is correct. So you understand that particular sentence. Now comes the time to ascertain whether this particular sentence is true or false. How do you ascertain this? By syllogism. This is where the chapter of qiyas comes in. So a syllogism is a kind of logical argument. So again, the word argument, we have to understand, even when you are studying a formal logic in the Western philosophy, for example, they use the word argument. So when we speak about logical argument, we are speaking about premises and conclusion. An argument must have a premise and must have a conclusion. So knowledge in Mantiq, we will learn about premises and conclusions. We call it muqaddimatul ula, muqaddimatul thaniya, and the conclusion we call it the natija. And when it is a sound argument, we call it qawlul muntij. It is a sound argument that results after what you call it, putting those correct premise in its place. Applies deductive reasoning. What is the meaning of the word deductive? Deductive means that the premises are constructed in a way that you are able to deduce the conclusion, that there can be no mistake in it. So for example, earlier I gave the example, I say the universe is subjected to change. The universe is subjected to change. Everything that is subjected to change is contingent. Everything that is subjected to change is contingent. So what is the conclusion? Now we can deduce. Now this is the meaning of deduction. Now we can deduce, since the universe is subjected to change, and everything that is subjected to change is contingent, then the universe must be contingent. This is for sure. This is a form of deduction that we are able to deduce from the premises. So it is an argument that applies deductive reasoning to arrive at a conclusion based on two or more propositions. Two or more yani propositions. Yani propositions yani based on the qadiyah. Yani the sentences that are asserted or assumed to be true. So in order for us yani to get any a true conclusion, or the premises yani must be true. Yani must be correct. Then only yani we can get a correct any conclusion. If any of the premise any is wrong, then the conclusion any is also is also wrong. And then the next part yani we speak any about the one yani who start any this writing any about this particular knowledge. The meaning of wadi' is the one any who compile, and the one any who wrote any extensively any in the early days any when people any start any to speak any about knowledge any of logic or mantiq is Aristotle, and he was born any in the year 384 BC yani in Greece. I'm sure yani many of us any have heard any of Aristotle, and he is any the student any of Plato. Plato yani spoke any about logic, but Aristotle, and the thing about Aristotle any he wrote any extensively any about all these any conditions any of the knowledge any of logic. Now, so because any of time, I will stop here inshallah, and inshallah any next week any we will continue. So other than this pertaining any to the 10 and the principles, whatever any that is left and is easy any to be learned, because everything any is going any to be straightforward. Then what I will do any inshallah ta'ala is that I will enter into the Sulam of Al-Imam Al-Akhdari, that is called Sulam Al-Munawwaraq, in the knowledge any of Mantiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless any all of us any with tawfiq and hidayah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.